I used to believe that life only changed for people who were lucky, talented, or fearless. People who seemed to know exactly what they wanted and how to get it. I never thought someone like me could experience a real turning point. Back then, my life wasn't dramatic or tragic. It was quiet. Too quiet. And I didn't realize that silence was slowly draining me. Every morning felt the same. I woke up already tired, not because I hadn't slept enough, but because I felt empty. I followed the same routine every single day, convincing myself that this was normal, that this was what adulthood looked like. Days blended into weeks, and weeks into months. Time moved forward, but I stayed in the same place, watching life happen from a distance. At night, when everything finally became quiet, my thoughts grew louder. Questions I avoided during the day refused to disappear. I kept asking myself if this was really all I was capable of. I remembered the dreams I once had, the ones that used to keep me awake with excitement instead of fear. Somewhere along the way, I had buried them under responsibility, doubt, and excuses. I told myself I was being realistic, but deep down, I knew I was just afraid. Fear has a strange way of disguising itself as comfort. Staying in the same place felt safe, predictable, but safety came with a price. It slowly turned into frustration, then into regret. I watched people around me take risks, fail, try again, and grow. Meanwhile, I stayed still, convincing myself that waiting was better than risking everything. Then one evening, after another long and uneventful day, something unexpected happened. My home. It was just a simple message. Short, almost insignificant. Under normal circumstances, I would have ignored it without a second thought. I almost did. But for some reason, I couldn't look away. I read it once, then again, and again. My heart started to beat faster, not from excitement, but from fear. My mind immediately filled with reasons to say no. What if I fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if this opportunity leads nowhere? I imagined all the ways things could go wrong, all the possible outcomes where I end up disappointed once again. Fear whispered that saying no would protect me, that staying where I was would keep me safe. But another voice, quieter and more honest, asked a different question. What if this matters? What if this is the moment I've been waiting for, without realizing it? I thought about all the chances I had already let slip away, all the times I chose comfort over courage. I realized something painful in that moment. Staying where I was didn't feel like living anymore. It felt like slowly disappearing. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, my hands shaking, my thoughts racing. I realized that fear would be there no matter what I chose. If I said no, I would be afraid of staying the same. If I said yes, I would be afraid of failing. And suddenly, the choice became clear. I was more afraid of regret than of failure. So I took a deep breath and said yes. There was no dramatic music playing in the background, no feeling of instant relief, just silence, followed by doubt. Almost immediately, I wondered if I had made a mistake. The fear didn't disappear. If anything, it grew stronger. But something inside me had shifted. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't standing still. The days that followed were difficult. Nothing magically changed overnight. I struggled. I doubted myself constantly. There were moments when I wanted to quit and go back to the safety of my old routine. But even on the hardest days, I was moving forward, even if it was slowly and imperfectly. With time, small changes began to appear. Not in my situation at first, but in me. I became more aware of my fears and less controlled by them. I started to realize that confidence doesn't come before action. It comes from action. Every small step I took made the next one a little easier. One day, without even realizing it, I looked back at my old life and felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not because it was perfect, but because it taught me what I didn't want anymore. I wasn't fearless. I wasn't special. I was just someone who finally chose to try. That one small decision didn't change everything instantly. It didn't solve all my problems or erase all my doubts, but it changed the direction of my life. And sometimes, that's all you need. A change in direction. A moment where you choose growth over comfort, courage over fear. If you're standing at a crossroads right now, unsure of what to do, remember this. Life doesn't usually change in loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes, it changes quietly, with one small decision you almost don't make. As time passed, something unexpected began to happen. I stopped obsessing over results. I stopped measuring my worth by how fast things were changing. Instead, I started paying attention to who I was becoming. I noticed how my reactions changed. Situations that once scared me no longer had the same power. Problems that would have paralyzed me before now felt like challenges I could face, one step at a time. There were still setbacks, days when nothing worked. Days when I felt invisible, unheard, and unsure if any of this was worth it. On those days, I questioned everything. My choices, my abilities, my decision to say yes. But even then, something was different. I no longer wished to go back to who I was before. That version of me felt too small now. I began to understand that growth doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly, in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way you refuse to give up on yourself. I realized how often I used to wait for permission to try, permission to fail, permission to believe in myself. And the truth was painful, but freeing. No one was coming to give me that permission. I had to give it to myself. Slowly, I stopped seeking validation from others. I stopped comparing my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10. Comparison had stolen years of my life. Peace returned when I stopped looking sideways and focused on my own path. One quiet moment changed everything again. Not a big event. Not a loud success. Just a simple realization. I wasn't behind. I was simply on my own timeline. That thought lifted a weight I didn't know I was carrying. For the first time, I allowed myself to move forward without constantly apologizing for where I was. I started to celebrate progress others couldn't see. The discipline, the consistency, the resilience. These things didn't make headlines, but they built foundations. And then came another truth I couldn't ignore anymore. The life I wanted was never waiting for motivation. It was waiting for commitment. Motivation fades, commitment stays. I committed to showing up, even when I felt unsure, even when progress felt invisible, even when doubt tried to convince me to stop. And slowly, opportunities began to appear. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because I did. I was paying attention now. I was ready. Looking back, I finally understood something that once confused me. People who move forward aren't braver than everyone else. They're just more willing to feel uncomfortable. Comfort had kept me stuck. Discomfort was teaching me who I could become. If I could speak to my past self, the one who almost ignored that message, the one who almost said no, I wouldn't tell them everything would be easy. I would tell them the truth. Motivation fades, commitment stays. I committed to showing up, even when I felt unsure, even when progress felt invisible, even when doubt tried to convince me to stop. And slowly, opportunities began to appear. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because I did. I was paying attention now. I was ready. Looking back, I finally understood something that once confused me. People who move forward aren't braver than everyone else. They're just more willing to feel uncomfortable. Comfort had kept me stuck. Discomfort was teaching me who I could become. If I could speak to my past self, the one who almost ignored that message, the one who almost said no, I wouldn't tell them everything would be easy. I would tell them the truth, that it would be hard. That fear would show up again and again, that doubts would never fully disappear. But I would also tell them this: choosing yourself once makes it easier to choose yourself again, and that's how change really happens. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small decisions that slowly shape your future. If you're still listening, maybe part of you recognizes this feeling. That quiet pull telling you there's more. Don't ignore it. You don't need to be fearless. You don't need to be ready. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to decide that staying the same is no longer an option. Because one small decision won't change everything overnight, but it will change the direction, and direction changes everything. If this story touched you, please support the channel by subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them.